All right, welcome everyone, and I just wanted to mention that this is our second virtual forum from the Access Services Interest Group of ACRL, and very pleased to have Christina Rose and Beth Daniel Lindsay, who both work for NYU. Christina, the head of Access Services for NYU Libraries, and Beth is the librarian for Access Services Instruction at NYU Abu Dhabi. So we are now global, which is awesome. Before we get started into it, I just had a couple of announcements, and then I will turn it in very quickly and then turn it over. The interest group will be meeting at Annual on June 23rd from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m., and we will be discussing the first draft of the Framework for Access Services Librarianship. That first draft will be going out at the beginning of that week for people to see, but I'm very excited to be able to share that first draft along with all of the focus group chairs as well. I also wanted to mention and thank Derek Dolby and Freddie Martinez Garcia, who are incoming conveners for the group, and also to thank Devon Armstrong, who will be coming in as the next convener at the beginning of the next fiscal year, and I become the outgoing convener, which is will be kind of interesting and fun. The last thing is just to mention that there will be a poll coming out very soon from one of those focus groups from the framework on marketing and outreach. So please keep an eye out for that and participate, because they need your input and information to help them complete their portion of the framework. That's all of the announcements. And with that, I just want to turn it over to Christina and Beth. And thank you so much for doing this today. And thanks to all of you for tuning in and participating.
Hi, everybody. This is Christina. I just wanted to thank ACRL ASIG for having us today, and all of you for joining us. And a special thank you to Brad and Lois for setting everything up. We are thrilled to be here talking to you about this. I am sitting right here in New York City. It's 12 p.m. and I want to hand the virtual mic over to Beth.
Hi, everyone. I also want to thank Brad, Lois, and ACRL. I am in Abu Dhabi, where it is 8 p.m. So please be kind. We're so happy to be here with you today, and thank you for attending. So here you'll see an overview of our plan for our presentation. We'll describe NYU's context, including how assessment works here, why we use Tableau, discuss some use cases, and finally provide you with tips on getting started and discuss our future directions. To give you a bit of context, you can already tell that NYU is a complicated institution by our presence in New York and Abu Dhabi. And our work on everyday assessment is shaped by our environment. So NYU Libraries NYU includes 3 degree-granting campuses. Those are in yellow here on the map: New York, Abu Dhabi, and Shanghai. We deliver library materials to all 3, plus 11 academic centers on 6 continents. Those are in orange on the dot. NYU is truly a global network. Each campus has a full library, but NYU in New York City is responsible for delivery and resource sharing for all. New York City also coordinates ILS management. We use Aleph and assessment, although NYU Libraries does not have an assessment department or assessment librarian. Responsibility for assessment is dispersed. This is a picture of the NYU Abu Dhabi Library, again, to give you a little bit of sense of our context. I'm actually in this picture in the very back. It's a small library, only about 60,000 print items, but we have access to all of NYU's circulating collection and numerous e-resources. And here you see a couple of images of Boats Library, which is the main library in New York. Boats houses 1.5 million volumes on site, and NYU Libraries has over 4 million circulating items. Access services at NYU is fairly typical, except that each campus has its own access services unit. As mentioned, we don't have a dedicated assessment unit at NYU, and until fairly recently, most assessment was done in New York City for either annual reporting or upon request. So when we say access services at NYU, we're talking about circulation, course reserves, library access, on-site and remote stacks. Although we don't have off-site storage in Abu Dhabi or Shanghai, we sort of think of Boats Library in New York as our off-site. Delivery services, resource sharing, and space management. And Finally, our approach to assessment comes directly from our 2013 to 2017 strategic plan, which had a goal of becoming a data-aware organization that promotes open exploration of data and grounds our decision in evidence. This is also part of why we don't have, or I should say, why assessment responsibility is dispersed. So now you've heard a little bit about us, and we would like to find out a little bit more about you. So Elois is going to run these polls. Elois, is this when I should stop sharing my screen, or should I wait until the results are in? Oops, peek ahead. All right, so here are our questions. If you'll just give us a quick yes or no, do you have different units or branches in your libraries? These are anonymous questions, I should say. It's anonymous responses, but we will be able to see, you know, in aggregate, 50% of people said yes or whatever. The second question is, have you needed to make a case to your administration that you needed more support, i.e. money, in your department? And it does occur to me that as a person who works overseas and does not use dollars, I could have done better there with dollar signs. And the last question is, are you currently using Tableau? Even if you consider yourself a beginner, if you are using it, we would encourage you to say yes. So if you'll just go ahead and answer, we'd appreciate it. Give us a better sense of the virtual room, as it were. So I hope everyone has had a chance to vote. Okay, so here's our results. Interesting. So about 70% of people have different units or branches in their library, so the majority. And 90% of people have needed to go to their administration to ask for more support. So that's a huge number. When we practiced, I guessed that it was going to be like 95 or 100%. And then our last question, are you using Tableau? So, oh, interesting. So about 30% of people are using Tableau, and for the rest of you, oh, did I do my math? No. And so the rest of you are not. So that's great. Thank you so much for sharing with us. We appreciate it. So I'm going to share my screen and go back to our presentation. All right, so thanks again. There will be another poll later. Okay, over to you, Christina.
Sure. So I'm going to, Beth has talked a lot about the environmental factors shaping our work in everyday assessment at NYU. I want to talk a little bit about some of our observations about the need for everyday assessment. And this is based on our experiences in access services and also a close read of the literature about access services assessment. The first observation is access services personnel may be time stressed and may not have deep assessment experiences. The time stress and the deep assessment experiences really come as a result of the variety of our jobs. If you look at any textbook on access services, and I only know of one, you'll note the huge number of hats many of us wear. Assessment is only one of many of our duties. We manage all sorts of different services and are expected to serve many different functions, from a manager to an outreach and marketing person to sometimes a web specialist, a workflow innovator. And we also fill in at the desk whenever there's a flu outbreak or something big happens. The list is really endless. And so assessment is just one piece of a big, broad scope of jobs. And that makes it kind of hard to develop deep expertise, which is hence the need for the model we're going to talk about. I'm also speaking for myself. I don't have formal training in data analysis or visualization. This is something, the work I've done, I've picked up along the way. But before we implemented our everyday assessment approach, which we're going to talk about, I only did any sort of assessment during annual reporting season. And usually this is a really painful process of getting reports from our system analyst who was really helpful, but I would have to take those reports into Excel, analyze them, and then if my director had another question, I was constantly going back and forth. And it was like reinventing the wheel every single year is what we were doing. So it was a frustrating and time-consuming process, and it was also fraught with errors. The second observation I have is that quantitative data analysis is the low-hanging fruit of assessment. And this, all of these observations were pulled out of the literature. We're sharing the references at the end, but this one is all through the literature, and it's about how quantitative data can support day-to-day workflows and decision-making much more easily and quickly than longer-term, more substantive qualitative studies. You know, for example, knowing how many people typically use your service point on Mondays in May can help schedule staff. Seeing the peaks and valleys in services can be a first step in asking more substantive and deeper questions. But unfortunately, the data is often messy and hard to get. It can require a lot of actual cleanup to use. There are almost everybody that starts with a Tableau project talks about the data wrangling involved in that. And in Access Services, we sit on top of so many different systems that may be gathering that data separately. And these include circulation systems, room reservation systems, resource sharing, it goes on. And finally, in the literature, I noticed that many of us engage in really interesting one-time assessment efforts when we're developing services or making changes, but I didn't find much discussion about whether we go back to reassess these efforts, or whether there's any structure that allows us to do that. So that's part of what we're going to talk about today. And the final observation I have here is that data can promote change initiatives. This again was profiled in a couple different projects, which found that enabling everybody to see and explore analysis themselves helps support change initiatives. Data doesn't necessarily change people's minds, but when you get end users, and the end users in this case could be our staff, other people in the libraries closer to the data, it really helps give a sense of control and also increases everybody's ability to be creative and answer questions. So NYU's approach is based on two tools. And the first one is we have a library data warehouse. It is a single stop shop that brings in data from a bunch of different systems, and I have those listed here. The warehouse is a SQL-based data warehouse. It's maintained by our technical services staff, who are basically on a nightly basis for many of our systems going out and getting the extracts and bringing them in. I mean, it's automated. Obviously, it's automated. They are what's possible, what's made everything you're going to see today possible. And if you want more information, this is not really about our warehouse, but it's important to keep in mind that that is the structure upon which we are able to build almost all of these visualizations. If you want more information about them or what our data warehouse, I've shared at the end of this presentation there some contact information for them, and also a presentation that they did that you'd be able to see. If you don't have a warehouse at this point, please don't hang up. A lot of what we're going to show today is possible using reports downloaded from your systems and free versions of Tableau. The second part of our approach is Tableau Desktop. Tableau Desktop is a data visualization tool. It is a licensed software. It costs anywhere from $1,200 to $1,500. That's, I think, what we paid last per license. Tableau also has a free tool. It's called Tableau Public that you can use to create visualizations. It's not as powerful and it won't connect to a database, to a warehouse like we have, but it is possible to use it for lots of really interesting analysis. And if you look at Tableau Public, which is the website that people post their visualizations on, all of that stuff lots of that stuff is being created through the regular Tableau, the free version. We are connecting in Access Services. We connect to the library warehouse through Tableau, but there are many other more technically minded staff around here that use other tools. But for us, Tableau is really critical. So why Tableau? This image says it all for me. Ron Popeil is the just set it and forget it guy. I am probably really aging myself here. He had an infomercial years ago about a rotisserie oven in which you just set it and forget it. Tableau is like that. And one of the things Tableau, the big thing for me is you can set something up once. If you've taken the time to create a visualization, to translate your data from your search system to usable categories. For instance, at NYU, we have many different flavors of who we call a faculty member. And so if you've taken the time to group all those different categories together in a visualization, the next time you want to look at that with fresh data, you don't have to do it again. It's already set up. The other thing that Tableau really enables, which has been super interesting for me, is data exploration. It really supports not knowing the answer at the beginning. So if, we'll have many examples at the end of this presentation, but if you have a use case where you're like, what's the best hour for us to be open, you can start exploring that without having to hone in on, I think it might be 9 o'clock or something. Very closely related is superior filtering. It's very easy to see categories of data in Tableau rather than the way that Excel usually allows you to do it. It's also particularly great for dates. And finally, and this gets back to not having deep expertise, there's a whole suite of preset visualizations, and it's pretty easy to learn the basics. Of course, a lot of people, data scientists and other people, are using tools like Tableau to do really high-level stuff, but in Access Services for us, it's been helpful just for some basic things. So I have one case study I'm going to show right now, and then we're going to talk about what you all would like to see. But this one was from our copy card fill stations. At Bulbs Library, we still have photocopy machines. For most users that have an NYU ID, they can use them with their NYU ID, but for visitors, and we have a sizable number of visitors, they have to use a copy card, and they get them from the copy card refill stations. And so what was happening in the lived experience here was the copy card stations, every Monday morning it seemed I would arrive to work and I'd be told the copy card stations were down again this weekend, what are we going to do? And so when I went and started talking to people about this, working on copy cards is about as exciting as getting a new vacuum cleaner. And so there wasn't a lot of interest in this, but I needed to honor what everybody was telling me, that they were always breaking down. So I asked for some data, and this is what I got on the next slide. And it's fairly rich data. You see there's a date here and the floor. We have 3 copy card refill stations. They're on 3 different floors. And then the issue. And then on the side, there's a bit about when it was fixed, not for all categories. So I spent about a half an hour, and I'm only showing you this it's not like this wonderful, beautiful thing, but this took me a half an hour to just start making a little bit of sense out of this data. And this sort of illustrates what I'm talking about with filters and the dates. So for instance, the first thing, and it's over here on the right, I took Tableau's preset date filters, and I said, I really want to know what day of the week these things are going down, because it takes 2 business days to fix them. And so here on February 17th, we see that all 3 were down on a Friday, which means that they were down for not only the whole weekend, but likely until Monday or Tuesday. So no copying for our visitors during that whole time. So this starts pointing to a picture of how bad is this problem? Well, it looks kind of bad. And then the thing on the left here is reported issues. The other question was, well, why are these going down? Do we just need them to come and do maintenance more? Is it that there aren't enough cards in the machine? This and that. We just sort of want a sense. And this is what I produced for that. In both of these instances, I sent these screen captures to my director, and we're working on the problem now. So I mention this as this is a tool. If you're already using Excel, I'd highly recommend you at least try Tableau, because it is a tool for making quicker analysis and getting things that look good and are able to be used by other people very quickly. So now we would like to move to asking you a little bit more about what you would like to see today. We have several different things we can show you, and Alois is starting the poll, and we'd just like you to choose the top 2 or 3 items that you're interested in. Something on policy analysis, late fines, a visualization about space usage, one about service desk hours. We have one about collection maintenance, annual reporting, and then usage across services. And this kind of brings in resource sharing and CERC into the same visualization. So if you could take a moment and vote for your top 2 or 3.
And we will, at the end of the presentation, we'll share the link. We have uploaded the slides into our institutional repository. And what we're going to do with the internet's blessing and cooperation is actually go to Tableau Public and look at the visualizations in real time. So if you just desperately wanted to see the annual reporting visualization, but that is not what was voted, we think we'll have time for 3 or 4 probably, know that you will still be able to get to it. So rest assured.
And the other thing I would ask is if you have questions as we start looking at Tableau Public, we're going to share the link to my Tableau Public page so you can see it and follow along. Okay. Wow. So this is interesting. Service desk hours.
Yeah.
All right, Beth and I have to work really fast here. So service desk hours, space usage. Okay.
So space usage.
The usage across services was the third one. It's a tie.
Thank you, Brad.
Sure.
Thanks, Brad.
And Brad, if people have questions as we go through this, it's probably easier for us to take the question while we're on the visualization than at the end. And we'll see how that works out time-wise.
All right. I will politely interrupt you as needed so you don't need to monitor it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. So now we're going to switch over to my Tableau Public page.
All right.
And I think Beth is going to share her screen with me, right?
Yes, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just getting to the service desk hours. There we go. Oh, and I need to share with all of you the, I don't have, it doesn't look like I can access the chat box anymore. Is that correct?
I could.
Then I'm just going to stop sharing for a second then, because then I can see it when I'm not sharing. So for those of you, so this is, I'm just now putting the link. If you would prefer to just follow along on your own, I've just put the link to Christina's Tableau Public page in the chat box. And then Christina, I will give you the control. There you go.
All right, I've got the control. Okay. So this is a series of visualizations I did using our circulation and reserves transaction data, combining those because we have a combined service point in Boak's library for circ and reserve. Hold on, I gotta adjust something here so I can see. Excuse me a moment. Oh, just a moment. Second. Wheel, wheel, wheel. Anyway, so this set was some of the most useful I've done because it's been useful to a lot of people around here, and it answers a number of different questions. And we're cycling through for a moment. I don't know what's going on. This must be Tableau Public. Working slowly. Maybe I need to reload the page. Hold on a moment.
Come on, internet.
I know. This works so well in our tests. Beth, do you want to take the screen back for a minute and see if you, because I can't put in a new URL. Maybe we could just go back to the beginning.
Well, this is disappointing. Let's see. Why don't I try to just do, let's see, this was service desk hours.
Yeah.
So let's try to just load it.
One thing.
Yeah.
I'm curious if those of you on the call that might be using the URL are also having trouble.
Oh yeah, that would be helpful to know.
I was able to bring it up by using the URL.
It loaded for you, but very slowly. Maybe what we should do is ask everybody to get out of it. And I will just show you from here. Maybe that's what's happening. There's just too many people on it. I don't know. I'm just guessing now. Okay.
Well, here you go. Here's April.
All right, here we go. So anyway, this first visualization is a heat map, which basically on the left-hand side is showing the major categories of our patrons, and along the top is the time period. And what this does is it ranks patrons by the amount of circulation per time period you chose. So over here we have a couple filters. On the right we have Bob's Library, and then we have time periods, and then you can select month or day of the week. The reason I have it with day of the week is at Bob's Library, our hours are Monday through Thursday is one set of hours, Friday is a set of hours, Saturday is a set of hours, and Sunday is. So this was started in the summer of 2014. No, I'm sorry, in the summer of 2015 when we were looking at our hours, and my circulation managers were telling me that no one ever comes into the library before 9 a.m. Or before 10, and nobody's really using us late. So that's why we started with this heat map, which attempts to answer the question, if we change our hours, who's going to suffer? So I'm going to avoid messing around with the filters here, but you could do that later on your own and sort of see how it works. But one thing I will tell you is if you choose different months, obviously in July, our faculty are the heaviest users of the library. But and undergrads are underneath that. But in April, the first thing we were looking at, the undergrads are on the top and the faculty are far down. The other thing I really like about Tableau, and I don't know whether Beth can show us this, if you hover over one of these boxes, it'll show you the total circulation. So again, back to this idea of data exploration, if you set your visualization up with enough filters and enough of these tooltips, you can really have people kind of explore the data on their own with their own questions and their own time periods. So that I'm going to move over to the next tab, average circ by hour and day. And this one I set up for our service point managers really, and it's just showing the average circulation at various time blocks during the day. And again, with the similar filters, Thursday, you can select a month. And the reason for this one is sort of to answer the question, what should my scheduling be? How many people do I need to have on? At our circ desk, we don't have an open hold shelf, so about 15% of our traffic is stuff that is coming from our hold shelf. So as you can see, 3 p.m. is a really busy time for us. It's also the time we probably have the most people on. But 10 a.m. isn't, it's kind of busy too. And of course, if you change the filters, you see different results because it really matters what's happening in the summer and all that. So let's go to the third tab here, circulation by month and day, and I'll show you kind of what's going on here. Hopefully it'll spin.
Just real quick, I also wanted to point out one of the filters you'll see is the libraries. And so this would allow not only Bob's Library to see their traffic, but other libraries within NYU systems to see what their traffic is like.
Thank you.
Again, with the set it and forget it.
Right. The over here this is circ by month, hour, and weekday, and this is just yet another view. This one brings in our self-checks. We have self-checks at Bob's Library, and that's in orange here. And so we're seeing of total circulation, what proportion is self-check through the day. What's interesting to me about this when I looked at it, and this is one of the examples of doing this kind of thing then raises more questions. So 10 a.m., right? We have a lot of people using the self-check. We're actually busier at 3 p.m. and 4 p.m., and there's less self-check usage. But as I said before, the majority of our staff are at the desk at 3 and 4 p.m. So, but I also know that our hold notifications go out around 1 p.m. So is this low usage of self-check, relatively low usage because there are more people on and people prefer to go to a person and they're less likely to use the self-check? Or is it because they're getting hold notifications? I could figure this all out if I wanted to spend more time with our data, but it just is an example of how it raises more questions. And of course, if you select different time periods, this pattern will change somewhat too. All right, let's see. And then we've got the last one is, the last tab here is probably just something that is really useful for me more than for other people. It's total circulation transactions. And the reason it's useful for me is I'm often called upon to determine the library service point hours during really micro times during the year, like the week between Christmas and New Year's. So what this one just shows total circulation by date and hour. You can see Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I had preset this up to be the week between Christmas and New Year's last year. And so in being called to, I always try to keep it to one shift, and I always try to pick the right time, like the best time. And also I'm also often asked, do we need to be open 3 days? Do we need to be open 2 days? And from here you see, we don't have a lot of traffic during this week, but this where it's dark blue here, 45, that was the hour before we closed. So there's clearly enough people to justify being open. It just, we probably don't need to be open early morning. We probably need to start about 11 and run through 7. And that's probably what we did. And this is also helpful if you want to see exactly what happened yesterday. Because one of the things about our warehouse, because we're updating things on a nightly basis, you could actually see what happened at the desk yesterday. And some of our managers have used that in the past, particularly around issues of people saying, well, it was so busy yesterday. Well, let's see what actually happened. And of course, I do recognize that not all busyness is about actual transactions. Some of it is about questions and other things that are happening at that desk. But this is an interesting way to start understanding peaks and valleys in service and making some decisions based on that. Any questions about this before we move on? We're going to go and Beth's going to talk about space. Okay, let's talk about space.
Sorry, I just realized that I was muted.
Oh, good, because I was like, I can't hear you, Beth.
Sorry about that. Okay, so take 2. So I'm now on the NYU Abu Dhabi Library live data, headcount data live for server. So in 2014, NYU Abu Dhabi moved from our temporary campus to our permanent campus, and our temporary campus had been significantly smaller. So when we moved into this significantly larger library, we decided we wanted to get a better sense of exactly how our users were using the library, where they were, what spaces, etc. So we started taking count every 2 hours during the day. And we started in November. And so this is a little bit deceptive because it's not the full academic year, because things were just too hectic at the beginning. But then so we did that for 2 years. And then after that, we decided that we no longer wanted to count quite so frequently. And instead we count 5 times a day. So I have written about this. If you're interested in the Journal of Access Services, we have a link to that at the end. But so that was our initial thought of why we were doing it. And you can see, so that's sort of here just giving you a general view of just how many people are in the library. It's similar to the viz that Christina did for checkouts. And then on this side, I just did the 2 most recent years. We can see, well, where are they in the library? Where are our users? So as you can see, most of them are in the main hall. What this has been particularly useful for is that sometimes administrators come to the library in the morning and they see, would I like to reset the view? Sure. They see an empty space and they say, well, where is everyone? No one's using the library. But we can very clearly with this show them that actually plenty of people are using the library. The library is most popular after 4 p.m. and even more popular after 8 p.m. And that's not when university administration is going to come and visit the library. We also were able to show our group study rooms, this in the lower right-hand corner, our group study rooms data, because that's another space where the administrators will come through in the morning and see these empty rooms that have doors in them, and they think, oh, we could maybe use these as an office. But we were able to demonstrate that, no, our students really make good use of the group study rooms. It's just in the afternoon and evening when students are studying and not in the morning when you're visiting. So this was really helpful to us. And upon reflection, I realized that this would have been probably a more accurate reflection. I'm sorry to use reflection twice, but if I had done percentage of occupancy, because as you can see, our single rooms are using a significant chunk of the group study rooms, but they're by definition only one person per room. And so if I had done percentage occupancy, I have a feeling that the single rooms would be an even more significant portion because they're all occupied. And again, it kind of goes back to this the setup we have of the lived experience of, are people actually using the library, you know, versus the data shows us that yes, people are really using the library. And here's our evidence.
Okay, so now I think we'll move to the third most voted usage across services. Beth, are you still in control? I think you're in control, so maybe you can just drive on that one and I can talk through it. So this is a set of visualizations I did to start understanding what is happening, what is print usage holistically. So it includes our circulation of our owned items, ILL returnables, and then the items that we've borrowed off of EasyBorrow. And EasyBorrow is PALC's consortial borrowing service. We're part of that. We joined in 2014. So one of the things, and while this is spinning, I will just talk through this, but one of the things that has come up is that when we joined, there was a thought that EasyBorrow would replace ILL or would take a big chunk out of ILL. So we were really, we didn't know how much more staffing or how much more resources we would need to support EasyBorrow. And so when I started visualizing the trends for EasyBorrow and ILL and Circ, it sort of showed us something else. And I'm hoping this will come up. And if you are on Tableau Public, my site, if you wouldn't mind getting off, I think that might help. Give it a minute to spin through. This is frustrating. I'm sorry, everybody.
Thanks for your patience and for bearing with us.
Okay, Here we go. So there were a couple things. The reason I split this, you see it's split by faculty, graduate student, and undergraduate. The dark blue is the usage of our own collections. The red is EasyBorrow, and the light blue is ILL returnables. So at just a glance, what we're seeing here is EasyBorrow is really not replacing ILL. It is a service in addition. And that was a really, I mean, this is a really simple thing, but just that kind of visualization really made my case that we needed to add a little more staffing and think about the resources in a different way. It made it much more compelling. And the reason I split it by these three slots is there was also a belief that EasyBorrow wouldn't be real useful to faculty. And again, what we're seeing is, yes, over here on the left, faculty ILL usage has gone down over the 3 years that we've had EasyBorrow, but it hasn't gone down that significantly. And it is also an additive service.
Oh, Christina, I noticed someone just asked, what is EasyBorrow?
Oh, I'm so sorry. EasyBorrow is a direct consortial borrowing service that we are members of PALC, which is the Pennsylvania Academic Library Consortium. And one of their major services is EasyBorrow. It's a union catalog of all the library's holdings, and people are able to, our users are able to request items directly from other libraries. It is basically makes a lot of ILL for returnables very easy. And we all agree to a 12-week loan. And it's the other term for it is called Circ to Circ, because instead of having to go through a lot of processes that we do with ILL of creating item records and this sort of thing, the requests are placed directly into the other library's Circ system. So it's a kind of a different thing. At NYU, we've done a lot to integrate EasyBorrow within our discovery layer. So it's also interesting to me that one of the other interesting stories here, and we could go a lot further on this than just this simple visualization, is looking at, because we've done so much integration, it seems that we've created a whole other, pod of material for people to access, and they are, and then it becomes an additive service rather than something that's really taking a lot from ILL. Beth, can we move to the second tab on this?
Yes.
And I just show as an example of kind of, you can have a different view in Tableau of using the same data, and sometimes it reveals something else. So this one, though, and if this spins forever, we'll just talk through it. But
well, maybe we could take the other question while it's
sure.
up, and I think this one is for Beth. Somebody asked, what sort of platform or tool are you using for collecting the space data for usage and head counts?
We use Google Forms. And then, so that's how we get the data, and then it's stored in Google Sheets, which Tableau will connect live to Google Sheets, which is great.
Thank
so
you.
That's also another example of not all the data we're playing around with here is in our data warehouse, and that's an example of one that's not. And Tableau has a lot of different connection hooks that you can put into all sorts of different data. So finally, on this print usage by service and user type, this is at the top we see the EasyBorrow usage, the middle is ILL returnables, and the bottom is NYU collections. Dark blue is faculty, red is undergraduates, and orange is graduate students. And the reason I did it this way is what you're, obviously 3 years of trend data is not, we'd want to see like 5, but we don't have 5 as a possibility here. But we are seeing that the usage of NYU Libraries collections is gradually going down, except for this odd tick up with faculty. The usage of ILL returnables is going down a little bit, but kind of flat. And then, of course, EasyBorrow is growing. So it's just another way of making the same point that this is an additive service. And this was a compelling way to do this, and frankly did not take that much time. Back to the time stressed. So it is 12:42. Beth, maybe we should move on to our last couple slides and then come back save some time for questions, or do we want to talk about any of these other things on Tableau Public?
I really like your collections one with the East Asian.
Okay, we can talk briefly about that. Okay, talk about that. You can drive there.
Let's see if I can get to it. Nope, not that one. Oh, just a second.
Thank you all for sticking with us. It's a little bit of a challenge to be, Beth and I have worked together for years virtually, and so this will be our first virtual presentation together. so this is sort of an example of what we're doing around collection maintenance, and it's a mix. This was used to help make decisions in the East Asian collection. The East Asian collection's on the 10th floor of Bopes Library. It's a limited space, and there's no possibility of adding shelves or expanding. And we had gotten a huge collection of Japanese comics, and we were running out of space in the room. And the Stack staff were telling me, Christina, those books are really dusty, which is their word for they never go anywhere. And the selector was new and was really I was like, well, we need to move some of this to remote storage if we're going to be able to put the new stuff in. And she's like, I'm new and I want to make sure I don't make my faculty upset. And so we started with this. I put together basically this. It was just some very basic visualizations of usage. And the first one you see here, we have call number running along the right side here, along by fiscal years. So she sort of wanted to know what were the patterns of circulation over all these years. Now, and which parts of the collection are the most popular. The one thing that this does not do, which if I would do it again, I would probably put in a usage rate, because PLs is the largest part of the collection, and it is also the most circulating. Kind of makes sense. So I would change this to usage rate. But at the time when I did that, I didn't have access to that data. The other thing but this did make the point to her that overall circulation in the collection was really low. So this is a pretty low stakes decision already. Now let's go to circulation by user type. And this is, I'm going to have to ask you to use your imagination here a little bit. The circulation data in our warehouse is enriched with the NYU school and sometimes down to the department if it's not too granular, if it's for larger departments. And so what we did with circulation by user type, and if it rolls through ever, I'm sorry
get
about this. This is not something we could have tested for, and I think it's either a lot of people are on it or something is going on with their server. Because usually it's really quick on Tableau Public. It's not a good view of it. While it's spinning through, I will give a plug for going onto Tableau Public and just like searching on libraries. There's a lot of really interesting projects and examples out there. At NYU, we haven't really made our own public site. Partially, it's just the preference of our administration. So I kind of keep it on my own page, and I keep less data on there because of it. But other libraries allow you to do a lot more with their stuff.
Yeah. And we have recently gotten a license to something called Tableau Server, which will allow us to share more broadly within NYU. And so it would require a login, but we could share somewhat more sensitive data that we might not want just out for anyone in the world to see, or, you know, FERPA protected or whatever. And so that is another way.
I think we should.
I think you should just reveal what it shows. Just tell them what it shows.
So anyway, the sort by user type basically showed us that, you know, where she was looking for her core faculty, which are kind of spread through different schools and departments. It turned out that they weren't the major users of the collection. It was the Cooper Union students, Cooper Union is a small art school that's part of our consortium. They were the major users. So this really freed her up to say, okay, fine, we can offsite this collection. I will say the other way I worked with her was we sat down in front of Tableau together and worked collaboratively and pulled stuff around and configured this together. And bringing her into that decision-making process and me at the same time was a really powerful way to get to yes.
One of the things we like about Tableau is it's just not going to agree with us right now, but it's a powerful picture when you see, because the Cooper Union usage just dwarfs every other bar. I mean, it's at least, I don't know, twice as big is the other bar. And the NYU faculty is like somewhere in the middle behind, I don't even remember which other categories.
Right.
And so just seeing that gets through to people in a way that's different than numbers do.
Right. Thank you, Beth.
So do you guys want to take another question?
Sure, we can take another question.
So somebody asked if you could talk a bit more about some of the data sources that you're bringing in.
Sure. For circulation, we have several different views. We have transaction, and it's down to the line level. And our warehouse tracks back to 2008 when we started with our current ILS. And our technical services staff is doing some computations on that. So we have initial circulation, reserves, all sort of the ARL reporting categories. So that's for that. We're also bringing in data from Relay, which is what runs EasyBorrow. We're bringing in data from Iliad. Again, these are, you know, each transaction one line, and then in Tableau you can do things like count, sum, average, whatever you need to do. We're enriching some of our data. So with ILL, we just started this, and it's something I'm hoping to do in the next year, but we've just started enriching it with call numbers, which will make us able to start doing more subject area analysis on ILL and EasyBorrow and Circ altogether. The other categories of data we bring in room reservations data. We don't bring in our library access data of people coming into the building, partially because the data is really messy and we're getting it from our public safety. It's just an institutional issue here. But ideally, that, you know, if you look at Tableau Public at some other libraries, they have that access data, and that would be really rich source. We have to rely on sort of Circ transactions and things like that. We get data from our bookstore about what the current book orders are, and those are being used to match what's in our collection. And we tried putting that stuff on reserve. Guess what? It didn't circulate. But instead, we're sending the bookstore links to ebooks, and they're putting shelf tags that this is available at the library. So the bookstore data is a new project that we started on in the last couple of years, but it's all in the warehouse. I can access it through Tableau. I can download poll lists for our staff if I want to do that, or I can tell our reserve staff if they need to do a little linking to go do that. I'm trying to think of what other data sources. Beth, do you
Well, like I said, our headcount data comes from the Google Sheets that we create via Google Forms. Yeah, and then I think everything else that we do uses our, I mean, I did sort of like you, Christina, I had someone, we were looking at budgeting information, and like I was saying earlier about the picture of the bars versus the numbers. So my colleague had made some tables of this was the budget and this is what we spent on X and what we spent on Y and Z, because she had been able to affect one of those variables in a significant way. And so in about half an hour, I turned that into a beautiful bar chart for her that really demonstrated that change that she had put in place decreased whichever line it was by more than half. And so it doesn't even have to be like fancy. That was just like an Excel, like a table.
Right.
So shall we go ahead and, sorry, Brad.
Other questions?
Do we want to talk about tips for getting started and future directions, and people can sort of reflect on whether they have any questions and go ahead and type those in?
That's a good idea.
Yeah. You're fine right now.
Okay. So in terms of getting started, Beth, did you want to talk about this?
Sure. So you can try Tableau Desktop for free for a limited time period. It's about 15 days right now. So, and do know that the 15 days starts when you download it, because I did not know that. I was like, oh, I'll download it and use it after vacation. That was a mistake. So don't be like me. You can learn a lot by looking at the dashboards on Tableau Public, especially if you search the library. We think the best work is done by assessment professionals. So as I mentioned, NYU has a server level license for Tableau, but you don't have to have that. You can either share on Tableau Public, or you can package your viz. So the images are called visualizations, vizzes for short, using something called Tableau Reader, which works like a PDF, but it's interactive. So that's a great option. And then if you don't have a data warehouse, because you don't have this team of people to manage it, as long as the structure of your data that you've downloaded from another library system or wherever doesn't change, Tableau will still be very useful, because you set the viz up once and then just change the data source. So you go from 2011 to well, that was really old. You go from 2015 to 2016 to 2017 to 2018, like whatever. It's a non-replication of effort. Christina and some others in New York received a 3-day training from Tableau to get started. I'm self-taught. I use lynda.com and Tableau webinars. And then Christina, did you want to talk about deep work?
Yeah, so one of the things I did when I was learning was just shut my door. And if you haven't looked at this book, it's called Deep Work by Cal Newport. I can't recommend it enough. And it's about, if you want to learn something complicated and a little bit hard, you have to give yourself time to work on it. And I did that for about 2 weeks, and I got a long way in learning some basic skills on Tableau. The other thing I would say about learning is that learning about your data is actually harder than learning Tableau. And I had this thought, and then 2 days ago I had a discussion with a data scientist here at NYU, and she said the exact same thing. She's like, Tableau is the easy part. It's learning your data is the hard part, and I would agree. So.
Oh, and the help documentation online is fabulous. You can literally Google Tableau and then write what you want to do, and you'll probably find out where someone has told you how to do that, which is great.
Yeah, which is another strong point of this program. So future directions for us. We are really interested in taking more holistic and deeper looks at usage. And this is going to require Access Services to really reach out to our technical services team and our collections team. I know that we are not under, there's an increased emphasis on affordability here, which will mean looking again at what are we spending our money on collections-wise? How is that being used? Where are we unique? Maybe comparing our data with other libraries and things like that. So the warehouse is a tool for that. Tableau is also a tool for that, especially with communicating that to administrators and other end users. We mentioned Tableau Server. That's a big place that, a big goal for Access Services this year is to get some get more into Tableau server that our branch managers can use to monitor their services, especially richer data. We have a lot. I've done a lot with circulation and reserves data, but I want to do more with ILL and Easy Borrow data. And what else, Beth?
We also hope that Tableau, the set it and forget it aspect and the non-replication of effort will help in the face of staffing changes. So I'm actually moving back to the US next month. And so I'm hopeful that the visualizations that I've created for my colleagues here at NYU Abu Dhabi will continue to serve them. Even after I've left, the headcount visualization, for example, will continue automatically to get updated. So that work doesn't go away just because I will.
Right. Very sad. And the final thing I would have to say, and it sort of echoes something that Chris and Lauren talked about in the last one of these talks, is that, you know, for us, all of the systems that run access services are going to change in the next 2 to 5 years, maybe even sooner. And so when I look at systems, what I really care about is, you know, not only that it's good, but that we have access to the data. Because if you don't have access to the data, you can't do this kind of work. And I think it's fairly important for running our libraries. So they pretty much said the same thing. They had a very different and technical take to it, but I would agree with that thought. And as a community, we should be really thinking about that as we look at these systems. Any last questions for us?
Just somebody had asked for the title of the book, but I think Beth had included it. If you don't mind, before we end the recording, of just putting the title and author information in there, that way it'll be in the recording for people who want to look it up later.
Sure.
Yes, I believe so. Just before we move this slide, I do want to say out loud, thank you all. We appreciate it. Here's our contact information. And then at the bottom, you'll see the link. This is a link to the slides if you would like to have them. And then after that, we have some credits to the data and analysts who made this all possible and their earlier presentation if you really want some nitty gritty on the library data warehouse. And of course, the meme credit. And then I want you to believe we are good librarians. We have a reference list for you. I thought we put deep work on here. So the name of the book.
Deep work, but I put it in the chat.
Okay.
One thing I will say about deep work is it's written by a business IT expert. So many parts of it are a bit annoying, but the overall thought about doing deeper work and creating space to do that is really important.
Sorry. Someone asked for the link to the slides again, so I'm going to put that in the chat.
Okay.
Beth and Christina, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your work, and it's very brave of you to do a international live demonstration on top of that. But I would reiterate that normally Tableau Public is not quite that slow. So who knows what was going on, but don't let that deter the people here in the audience from thinking that's something that's useful. Other than that, the recordings of both this forum and the last one from a couple weeks ago, I will be sending out to all the listservs soon. And as I mentioned, you know, keep an eye out for the, it's going to be right before ALA Annual, the first draft of the framework for academic for access services librarianship. And more meetings and discussions and whatnot. The other thing is that if you have an idea or you know of something really interesting that one of your colleagues is doing, we are always looking for more presentations for the virtual forums, especially as Derek and Freddie have the joy of putting that together starting in the fall. So please don't hesitate to contact those of us who are running the interest group. If you have ideas or things that you would like to share, I know that we've had a lot of participation and interest, and it's because of the excellent work that all of you are doing and from the network that we're creating. But once again, thanks for Christina and Beth and Lois for her technical support. And we will talk again in June and have some more forums later in the fall. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.